Hello and welcome to another episode of the Farr Show, where I am Damon Farr, and tonight we are talking about... That was supposed to be a scream. That's the thumbnail right there. There's no doubt there. We're talking about the movie Scream, which spawned a franchise. Wes Craven has a tendency of doing that. I mean, Nightmare on Elm Street, Scream, man. Two amazing film franchises with two of the first best horror movies of all time. I think I've talked about Nightmare on Elm Street at one point, but I really don't remember. As for Scream, I know I've never talked about Scream, and I felt like, man, now's the time to talk about Scream. I was like, what do I talk about? What do I talk about? Oh, Scream. That seems reasonable. So, I'm going to point out right away, this movie is an Farr. This movie is amazing. Wes Craven pretty much took the idea, hey, I'm a horror director, horror writer. Well, let's make fun of it and make it really meta. Well, he did that with A New Nightmare, and now he's doing it with Scream, which I like both of them, to be honest. Side note, before we get too far into it, a New Nightmare skin for Freddy Krueger would be really nice in Dead by Daylight, or Damien by Daylight as I call it. Alright, let's go back to it. So, the cast is really good. David Arquette, the wrestling legend, who won the WCW title, is in this movie. He's also in Ready to Rumble. I know those are really not things that people would know about David Arquette, but I thought that would be funny to put in. Neve Campbell is like the main character, and Courtney Cox is in it. This is where David Arquette and Courtney Cox met, so that's cool. For some reason I have Courtney Cox here twice, so I don't understand what happened there. And then Matthew Lillard, Shaggy himself. I think the cast is pretty good. I don't think really any of these people are super well known anymore. But back in the 90s, all of them were pretty up and coming stars, and then obviously over time they just kind of fell off. It's a really good movie though. So I'm gonna spoil some of the plot, so be prepared. So pretty much what happens, a girl receives a call from a guy saying, "What are you doing tonight?" type of a thing. And well, spoiler, it's Drew Barrymore. She dies within a couple of minutes. That was supposed to be one of the names on here, but I guess I wrote Courtney Cox twice. And he's like, well, your boyfriend's dead. Look outside. She looks outside and she sees her dead boyfriend. And that's terrifying to think. Then what happens is she starts leaving the house and she's killed. Within a viewing distance of her parents who just arrived. He slit her throat just right so she'd still be alive, but she couldn't scream. And I'm like, that's terrifying. Like, that's gotta be really terrifying to both be her and the parents, because the parents were right there and couldn't do anything because they didn't know, and she couldn't do anything because, well, couldn't talk. And then the big thing about this movie is the killer could be literally anyone. I mean, it could be anyone, which is insane to think. But I think it's pretty cool. Then there's a lot of jokes about horror, because this movie, while being a great horror movie or slasher movie, makes fun of horror in really good ways. I mean, you can't be the only one alone. You can't leave the room alone, and they make jokes about that. When they're watching the horror movie, the horror buff guy is like, yeah, you can't do this, you can't do that. You can't say, "I'll be right back," Matthew Lillard. "I'll be right back." So, spoiler, he is one of the two two guys who is actually Scream. It's him and his buddy. I always forget his buddy's name though. But I always just remember the scene where his buddy stabs him, and he's like, "You've gone too deep. I'm starting to feel woozy, man." And I'm like, all right, I can get behind that. Like, it's kind of cartoony in the way he does it, but it makes sense. I mean, if you just got stabbed and you got stabbed too deep, I mean, definitely helps. He eventually ends up dying, to my knowledge. But I really liked it. I think Scream is one of those horror movies that if you like horror at all, go see it. If you like movies at all, see it. Just see Scream. I mean, it's not going to be in my favorite films of all time. Or is it? But, you know, it's definitely a movie worth watching. So, don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe, hit that bell icon, and have a far off night. Or I didn't look at the Spidey cam again. I don't know what's going on.